Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing the comfort book tag. I was tagged by lovely Kate, who I will link down below, and without further ado, let's jump right in. So the first prompt is a book of steadfast comfort, always there for you, makes any day better, like a cup of tea. There are going to be a few books in here that I've mentioned on my channel before because I want this to be as accurate as possible. It's probably going to be unsurprising to some of you that the book that I'm going to pick is a Joe Abercrombie book, which may sound really weird given that Joe Abercrombie's books are quite dark. But the book that I picked was Before They Are Hanged, which is my favorite Joe Abercrombie book that I've read to date. The reason why that book feels like a warm cup of tea is because the characters feel so familiar to me. The world feels like home, weirdly. So whenever I feel like I need to pick me up, I will often just get one of my copies of Before They Are Hanged and I will just flick through and read through some of my favorite chapters. Something that I do quite often. I love it. It is slightly weird that I find such a dark book so comforting, but let's probably not psychoanalyze me on that. Okay. The second prompt is a book that reminds you of a loved one or a comforting book that was given to you or read aloud by someone dear. So that book was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. The reason why this book is comforting to me is because this is one of my brother's favorite books. The Hobbit is something that we talk about quite a lot between my brother and I, and Lord of the Rings in general. Honestly, like whenever we're together, chances are we'll talk about Lord of the Rings at some point. I haven't read the trilogy yet, but he has read them and he's pushing me to read them soon, which I will definitely get to it like early next year, I think. The world that Tolkien has created, especially the Shire, it feels like home. The reason why is because the way that the Shire is described, it reminds me of Oxford, which I associate with my brothers and my family in general. And so whenever I think about The Hobbit, I think about him. A book with particularly vivid prose or imagery, a story comforting in its richness, depth, or vibrance. So the book that I picked for this was, I actually kind of cheated a little bit and I'm picking, I guess I could pick one. And that is the Earthy Cycle by Ursula K. Le Guin. I've read the first 3 stories in the Earthy Cycle. I've not read the last, well, that's not true. I did read the last one, but I skim read it because I was told that it was not as good as the other ones, and so I just skim read it pretty much. So my favorite one out of the 4 is The Tombs of Atuan, and I really liked the main character in Tombs of Atuan, and even though it's kind of set in a labyrinth, the way that she describes the labyrinth is amazing. Like, you feel like you are in there with her, the main character. I had this like real sense of being trapped underneath there as you go through the story. I think she does a really wonderful job of prose in general. I really like her books and I need to read more of them. Whenever I think of something where there is amazing imagery, I always remember Tombs of Atuan because I just remember having a distinct memory of feeling like I was a part of that journey with the main protagonist. A book that keeps you going or encourages you when things feel dark. This book I read last year and I need to read more by this author, and that is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. Anxious People felt extremely familiar to me. One of the characters I actually identify with quite a lot. Her name also happens to be Zara, which is quite funny. I really enjoyed it. I read that book in a couple of hours. I think I will revisit again and again. The thing I love about that story is that it's just about how normal, everyday people are living that normal, everyday lives, and they're trying to make ends meet and they're trying to do the best that they can in the circumstances that they're in. When you get these different perspectives and you have this kind of hot mess of a group of people together, you realize that nobody has it planned out. Nobody really knows what's happening or what's going to happen in their life, and that's okay. And you just have to take each day and you just have to get through it and try to be the best person that you can. So I loved Anxious People and I just need to read more Bachman ASAP. Next prompt. A book that makes you laugh out loud or grin widely, coming to rescue on the gloomiest of days. The book I picked for this was Guards by Terry Pratchett. Guards is another one of these books that if I'm having a not so great day, I will often just flick through it and find some of my favorite quotes because it's absolutely hilarious. Terry Pratchett and Joe Abercrombie, I think, are the only two authors to date who have been able to make me laugh out loud, and that is pretty impressive. You've got your warm drink, a cozy blanket. What do you read when you're curled up in bed all day or for a few hours? To be honest, whatever I'm reading at the time. I don't really reread, or like, there's exceptional circumstances where I will go back and pick something up if, you know, I'm particularly struggling through something, or I remember a passage in a book that is kind of relevant to my circumstances in the time. But otherwise, you know, it really depends on what I'm reading. Whatever I'm reading at the time is often what I'll be reading, because I'm also one of those people that I am a monogamist when it comes to reading books. I only read one book at a time, well, one fiction book at a time. And so, you know, it's not as if I, you know, pick and choose which book I'm going to read. It's just that one book that I'm going to read at that time. So that was terrible. A book that brings you solace no matter how many times you reread it. So this book I read this book years ago, and I've read it about 6 or 7 times, and that is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. I think it's Hermann Hesse. And this book is very spiritual. It's very much focused on yourself and your actions and your ability to make a difference to your path, I guess, and also the people around you. It's a book that I just keep coming back to, and it's one that I also recommend to people who, if they're struggling through something, or if they're trying to figure something out, I feel like it's a book that can really help make things a little bit clearer. So Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, for sure. And it's a book that I also just strongly recommend. A book that restores your faith in humanity, faith in life, faith in yourself. A book that says it's going to be okay, the world is full of good things, and tomorrow will be better. So this one I picked, I didn't really know which one to pick for this, and then I thought about it a little bit yesterday, and I ended up picking To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. To Kill a Mockingbird is probably not a surprise to anybody. It's not the most original pick for this one, I think, but it is one of those books that, because it's tackling so many hard topics, it was ahead of its time, right? I think Harper Lee did an amazing job of distilling so many of the issues that we still see prevalent in today's society. Even though it's, you know, I think ultimately a very sad and quite depressing book, there are elements of hope in it. The fact that you're seeing it through the eyes of children makes it that much more, I don't know, hopeful, because children always tend to look at things through kind of rose-tinted glasses. Not always, but they have that tendency to kind of hope, I guess, which as you get older, you tend to lose that. You tend to lose that innocence. I don't know, it's a book that stuck with me for a really long time. I would actually really like to reread it. It does remind you that even though there are these really dark aspects of the world that we live in, there are also parts where there's a lot of light. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that more often than we probably do. I know I definitely do. I think it's a book that really grapples with some really difficult issues in a very sensitive way. So, To Kill a Mockingbird. 2 left. Imagining you were putting together a cozy comfort basket for your neighbor or your friend or a loved one, which books would you include? The first book I would include is a book that is probably not surprising to anybody by this point, and that is The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. The thing about The Three Musketeers is that it has so many different themes, so many different elements to it. It's got a little bit of everything in it. It's got adventure, action, fighting scenes, combat. I guess fighting scenes and combat are the same thing. Historical relevance, it's got politics, it's got everything in it. I think it's just a really good all-round book. And I think you can also recommend it to people of all ages, pretty much. I think it's a book that is full of a lot of hope, and it's full of a lot of really interesting topics that I personally am very interested in. I really love it. It's one of the books that I will often buy for friends of mine if they haven't read it. The other one I will say is the New York trilogy by Paul Auster. That book is so good. It's basically 3 stories within one overarching narrative. The 3 stories within it are the same story, but they're kind of told from different perspectives, and it's amazing. It's kind of trippy in certain ways. So if you like that in your books, you'll really like the New York trilogy. But it's very different. I've not read any book like the New York trilogy before. I actually need to read more Paul Auster because I'm just fascinated with the way that he writes. His narrative style and choices are fascinating. I love that it's a puzzle and you're kind of figuring out the puzzle as you go along the narrative. The reason why I would put it in the cozy comfort basket is because there's something so like special about it. I don't know how to explain it. I think you guys are just gonna have to take my word on it and read it. But there's just something very unique and special about it, and I just think if I was giving you a cozy comfort basket, I would include it. Last one. Tell us about a book with beautiful nature writing or a book that restores your peace. This pick, I picked Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I read Walden, I think it was last year. I actually think it was near the start of quarantine, and my brother told me to read it. It's a book about identity, purpose. I just dropped the cue card. It's a book about identity, purpose, capitalism, self-worth, all of these kind of very interesting and relevant topics. And it's set over the time where he is building a cabin, essentially, in rural Massachusetts. And you just get these really beautiful, vivid descriptions of what he's doing and what is around him. It's just a joy to read, honestly. It just feels so real. It feels like you're there with Walden as he's describing the things around him. I definitely recommend that you pick that up if you're looking for something with really beautiful imagery, because there's a lot of it in it. So that's it. That was the last one. Thank you so much again, Kate, for tagging me. I actually had a lot of fun doing this one because I had to think about it, whereas normally I just kind of go with the flow. So the fact that it like really made me think is great. And in terms of who I'm going to tag, I'm not going to tag anyone specifically. I think if you're interested in doing this tag, you should do it. It's a very unique one and I encourage you to do it. And if you do, let me know because I'd love to watch. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it here, guys. I hope you all have a fantastic day and I will see you in the next video. Ciao.